Hey, welcome to the roundtable. This is Jeff here with co-host Chip. I don't know what side he's going to be on. He's probably on that side. You guys are here on the chain. This is the On the Chain roundtable. We have a great guest with us tonight. You guys know him as Thinking Crypto. We know him as Tony from Thinking Crypto. But welcome, Tony. Hey, man, it's really great to be. It's great to have you here with us tonight.
Thanks for having me, guys. Always a pleasure to be chatting with you both.
That's awesome. Really looking forward to the conversation. And we're going to really dig in because you've been doing some amazing interviews with some amazing CEOs, with some amazing projects. And we want to talk about all that tonight here on the roundtable. And Chip, guess what? We're getting ready to start right now.
And now, the roundtable with Jeff and Chip on the chain.
And here we are. We're back. So before we get into talking about all these interviews, and we're going to dig a little bit into some of the key interviews because they're covering some really amazing projects. But man, your channel just passed 40,000 subs. Man, how does that feel? Great job.
Thanks, man. It feels really great. It's a lot of hard work and, putting out content. I think we were talking before the interview went live. I've got a family, two and a half year old, and a wife and day job. So it's a lot of work, but, I'm passionate about crypto. I love the technology and, talking about the future of it. And of course, I'm invested in it. So it's kind of a hobby. So it doesn't come, it's not a chore or an extra job per se. It's a hobby, but it has its benefits as well. So crossing over 40,000 was really cool.
Yeah, congrats on that, man. And I gotta say, it's great. I always find your perspective really interesting because you're not one of these maxis. You talk about, you publicly disclose your holdings, that you own Bitcoin and Ethereum or Ether, I should say, and XRP and a couple other ones. And I always like that you've always been open and transparent about that. And that's what's really great about your channel too. It's like Thinking Crypto. It's just like you really picked a phenomenal name for that because this is what everybody in this space has been doing, recently is Thinking Crypto.
Yeah. I look at it as in contrast or in parallel, to so to speak, with the .com boom. There's gonna be multiple winners. There's gonna be a lot of losers. I mean, and that's where you have to really do your homework, do your own research, and look at what has lasting potential, what is solving a real world problem. But to say, hey, Google is going to be the only winner coming out of .com boom when there's Amazon, there's eBay, there's Netflix, right? You got to look at the different use cases and what these different projects are targeting. And that's how I approach it and look at it. And of course, the common principles of investing, diversifying, because we don't know the future. You could put all your eggs in one basket. And what if that fails? Where does that leave you, right? So that's where I think about it.
I've done that.
I like that. I like that approach. I talked a lot about early on, even about diversification, and it's not just diversification within the crypto space, which I think is also critical because you bring up a really good point. Imagine what was the one big during the high tech boom? It was it pets.com or something? Yeah, it was going ballistic.
A little dog.
So imagine if that's where all your money was in pets.com and then it shut down. But you didn't invest. Across the board, you had to diversify because, like you said, you want to mitigate your risk a little bit also because it's a kind of a crazy space. But then you also want to make sure that you're invested outside of the space as well. I think across the board. Right?
Bless you, man.
Bless you.
Sorry.
Don't worry, it happens. You covered it up really well. So I'm just glad you're not sitting next to me without a mask. That's all. I'm just kidding.
It's going through the Zoom.
Little subparticles. Always at the most, the thing about the .com thing, which I think about, it's like, it would be like, is there an available .com? And you slap a name with .com on the end, and then boom, it was a company. It was a company, and VCs were throwing money at it. But there's similar parallels going on. So I'm starting to see the tribalism's even fracturing even more because you have the DeFi space, which has its own, there's so much weird stuff going on when they call it the hardcore DeFiers, and you were featured a project, I think it was like in the last couple weeks. When you look at that DeFi space, it's almost like they're this underground kind of cool kids club. Then you've got the crypto above board projects, then you got the ones sitting back. It sort of reminds me of it almost took a similar type of a route where you have the real high profile, these little subgroups. And when you go back to what Brad Garlinghouse said, he's like, hey man, 99% of these are going to fail. And I think he's spot on. They're going to fail, but there might be some cool acquisition. You might be able to go in there and get a team because they were doing something cool, but they just weren't hitting their milestones. They ran out of money. They didn't get it. A lot of it has to do with adoption.
Yeah, adoption and money. Right. And one other thing, Tony, what do you think about this one? There's, one of the things Chip and I talk about is that there's two categories, right? There's projects that are solutions to existing problems. And then there's projects that are solutions that are looking for problems.
Yeah.
And, and that exists, and you try to fill it in. Oh, well, this is going to be the best thing for what? Well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. And we saw in the ICO boom, in 2017, there was a lot of that, just random projects. I remember getting hit up by a lot of these, hey, want to talk about our project and we'll pay you, and, all those sponsorship opportunities. And I'm like, what do you even do? Like, I've looked at the West, I'm like, what is this? Like, what is going on here? Like, they're trying, like, to your point, trying to create a problem or solution for a problem that doesn't exist. But I feel like there's no way to escape it. It happened in the .com boom, but you have to be diligent, right? And not just be a bandwagoner. You have to sit down and think about this. Does this make sense? What is going to happen here? Is actually a solution? Could potentially get adoption? Do they have partnerships? Who's the team? Is there transparency? You have to really dig deep and read up on these things.
Yeah, and that's a great point to some of your projects right now, or some of the interviews, and having a team behind a project, I think that's really critical. And I know, Chip and I really, we had focused on that element, within, especially as you start reviewing some of these projects, where it's that if you have a solid team behind it, that project, has a much better chance of actually going places versus one that is you're just trying to piece it together. But you never know. I mean, it could just blow up because it's blockchain crypto. Yeah. Might be the next crypto kitties.
Yeah. And there's also the other aspect people miss, and it's a bit of manipulation in the market, but some of these things you can't avoid because we're so early and there's not much regulations in place. But a lot of these projects launch and they'll put money to pump the coin. So people are like, oh, wow, this has potential, but that's actually not what's happening. They may pump it so they can do a cash grab, and some of them close shop and you don't ever hear from them ever again. But there's some that are like, we're going to keep the pump cycle going. So there's a lot of that, and people get fooled by the price movements. Now, don't get me wrong, you can make money, but it's very risky. And there's people who've lost money as well.
Yeah, I wanted to say one of the big things, news that dropped this week, which I think is massive, is PayID, right? So PayID, I want to get your take on this because, it's funny. We did a video on it. People hit up in the comments like, we've had PayID in Australia for several years. And, obviously it's a closed ecosystem, but yeah, I mean, the U.S. I look at sometimes the U.S. is turned into like Apple, right? Apple's never been first with anything, right? Apple's it's like, hey man, I can finally copy and paste on my phone. It's like, yeah, well, they did that on Android 7 years ago, right? And, but I think where it comes into play is sort of perfecting it a little bit, right? Really thinking it through. It's like, okay, so you had Bitcoin and then you had XRP evolve from some of the shortcomings. You kind of thought it through. And I see with this release and the partners they brought in makes it a little bit different. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head here. It's perfecting, right? To your point of Apple, some of these things may have existed before, but were they served up in a way that is digestible and usable to the consumer? And I think now with PayID and with Ripple on board and interledger protocol integration and all of that, you have more expansion, more scalability. You have more companies now on board. You have that open payments coalition. So you got some momentum going now. And more visibility. And you have a company like Ripple, which is very payments focused, to take it to the next level. So I think we're going to see more adoption now come out around PayID.
Yeah, agreed. And then, I saw Crypto Eddie had sent Weetsu Wind on Zum, had sent him, XRP, and just like the feeling of doing that for the first time, I guess it kind of goes back to, using that dollar sign. It's weird. It's interesting they chose that, right? Because I'm like, that really is a US thing. It's like, boom, let's put our stamp on that, and where with an email, you have the @ symbol, right? So it's sort of like kind of bridges that whole thing. But even unstoppable domains, it's like, having, thinking crypto, cool, do Tony, with .crypto, you could send it there. So having all these other people and the Brave browser and all these people coming into this to me, I think this is probably one of the greatest things that we've seen in some time, man. It's blowing up. Jeff, where do you see this going with the whole PayID?
Man, I think it gets back to, what Tony was talking about with the, the projects where we're just, based on, if you have a project that has a good team, you have a better chance of succeeding. If you have a project that is actually providing, real world utility, it also has a better chance of succeeding. And so this is the one area that, they're developing this project, and it needs to happen in order for there to be main street adoption. If you don't have main street adoption, then call it an enterprise system. And just focus on the companies and the big banks and the big financial institutions, which is what Ripple is doing. But then they realize, hey, you know what? There's a whole other segment here that we have to help facilitate. And that, joining through this PayID mechanism. And I think also, one of the others, Tony, you just interviewed him on one of your last videos here from Bird or Bread. Is it Bread or Bird? BRD.
BRD.
Yeah, I don't know whatever they refer to it as.
They've rebranded a couple of times.
It could be either, right? Bird, Bread, Bird, Bit, whatever, Bard. But BRD. But that one, also partnering with PayID, and you're starting to see, how many entities now? There are 40. Is that what it is?
100 million users.
100 million. I mean, that's significant, but that's how important this PayID mechanism is as part of the overall package, and there's so much of that going on right now.
Yeah. Adam highlighted a few things there with the statistics and all the companies getting on board. And one of the things he highlighted that's important is that Ripple's kind of using the Google model. They're creating something or enhancing it, but they're not charging for it. They're saying,
I like that.
Hey, public, mainstream, everybody, enterprises, come in, check it out, right? There's no roadblock of I have to pay or, I have to sign up. Just use it. And that's great for building like your database of clients and getting adoption. And that's what Google, if you think about it, has done with Gmail and Google Maps. You don't have to pay for those services, but they have you in the database and they can now come and say, hey, buy our phone, or here's an upsell, get this premium feature. So Ripple taking this approach of not charging, I think is very smart. They're going to get more adoption, and then they can say, hey guys, have you heard about XRP? Or this is new product from RippleNet, whatever it is. But I think that's a smart way to do it.
Yeah, utilizing the interledger and utilizing PayID, means that you can basically work with any digital asset. And I think that's critical, which goes back to the original premise of diversification, not just from an investment perspective, but diversification in terms of a platform. You can't be, anything centric, so if you're going to be Bitcoin centric and develop your whole protocol based on Bitcoin, which I think originally BRD was all about the Bitcoin in the early days, but they quickly saw that they had to expand out, especially when we start looking from a global perspective. It's not just about crypto. It's also about euro, or, you have the dollars or the pound, or it could even be the yuan, whatever it is, whatever fiat currency also needs to transact through that, mechanism, I think is important.
Yeah. One of the things he highlighted is just that full interoperability of Bitcoin, XRP, US dollar, digital yuan, whatever it may be, depending on how the CBDCs get launched. But yeah, it doesn't matter what, currency you're holding, but that full interoperability, which is going to be critical for global adoption.
Right. Yeah. I like that.
Well, that's what everyone keeps talking about global adoption. And, it's been knocking on the door for a long time, especially when you look at Spring, look at the arm of Spring and some of the key investments, Forte, and their whole, just the Ripple's approach. What I like about it is that everything they do is their core philosophy. They went out there and said, hey, we're going to go beyond, we don't believe in walled gardens. So we are going to be purveyors of this, and we're going to put open source out there. We're going to bring people together to make it better. And I think that core philosophy has served them pretty well. And I think in the long term, as we see some more of these projects get launched, when I really looked at the white paper right away, I mean, that thing got launched. I'm digging through the white paper, and one of the things that I saw in there, looking at XRP, looking at the Spring, the SDK, which makes it really simple to, instead of taking all this code, just some simple stuff. You notice how it supports multiple, programming languages. Like, they really thought it through. And, I suspect that this thing was slated to launch much earlier, but then this whole thing happened, worldwide crisis happened. And I think that, maybe it kind of got delayed, but it seemed like they would have been playing right into a really good groove, and maybe it got put off. I could be wrong on that. I don't know. I mean, but I think ultimately this is an amazing thing. Like, I know that Matt Hamilton put up a little blog post on how to, on an Apache server, how to go ahead and create it. Because I was thinking we need something like hello $, on the chain.io. So, just like having that and being able to use simple things. And we've been talking about this for a long time. I thought unstoppable domains was a really good start, but the problem I saw with that was another walled garden, right? So if you get, I looked for chip.crypto early days, like when it launched, taken. I'm like, dude, I'm out of the game already. I haven't even started. You guys haven't even launched it yet, right? So the cool thing is if I own, whatever, I own a bunch of domains, it's like I can create now my own payment. I don't even have to have a live domain. I just have to be running it on the server, right? So, I mean, where do you see this going in adoption world? Do you see this like people really, taking off with this?
I think so. I think, it's kind of the crawl, walk, run process. You got used to PayPal in the late 90s or early 90s, and then using credit cards online and Venmo and all of that. So I think the natural evolution of payments, and you have the new generation of folks who were brought up in a tech internet world, right? Where like us, we were born in a non-tech internet world. We're probably the age of VCRs and things like that. But I think the adoption is going to spread much faster because they understand that concept. It's what they know or all they've known, versus using cash primarily or sending checks or whatever it is, right? But I think you're going to see that adoption. I think people are building their own websites now because it's so easy. You have so many sites that offer that service. One click above a button, you can publish a site. Everybody knows you can get your name domain and launch a podcast or whatever it is. So all these things are more prominent, and the education is out there. The information's out there. So I think we're going to see faster adoption than ever, just because, like, for example, I mean, we've seen the studies, and millennials, they don't trust banks. They like Bitcoin and crypto. So I think that concept is going to play well into their minds and in the adoption.
Yeah, that's good. That's really, I think it's important, as we start looking at from a generational perspective, but that also means that it's going to take some time to get fully implemented because we still have multiple generations that might not be as comfortable. However, there's ways that you can build it in. And one of the things that we've talked about here, from the back end, people are getting used to, like you said, paying online, shopping online, doing all these things online. I don't care what the architecture is that makes it happen. I just want it to happen, right? Yeah. So the majority of the people out there, they don't need to know that there's even a digital asset, behind. They don't need to know there's a blockchain behind it. They don't even understand how it works now. What difference does it make how it works tomorrow? Other than it's more efficient, from an investment perspective, from a developer perspective, from a builder's perspective, it's important. It's probably one of the most significant things that's happened, to our online world, is to be able to move into this, into this decentralized, more transparent, more efficient way of doing things, taking away from centralized control from a PayPal, for instance. I've been on both ends of PayPal over the years on the benefit of utilizing it as a payment, and then also fighting for receiving my payments. In the early days, working with eBay and PayPal, and understanding that you have no control.
Yeah.
That when you're using them as a payment provider, and they decide they want to pull money out of your account, they pull money out of your account, and it happens instantaneously. And they then hold it over your head, and you have to fight like hell to get it back, because now you're debating another party. And so that there's all these different elements of that. And so it's really amazing. It's really this mainstream adoption is everything. When we begin to see crypto really get to that next level, and as we look back, I mean, what are your thoughts on this? We look back, we look at that 2017 boom, right? It was like that last few months of 17, right into the first couple weeks of 18, and we see everything just going parabolic. It was the craziest time ever, outside of the 90s, when you saw the stock prices and IPOs every day, just going crazy. And so that was that same period, in this space, but it had no substance behind it, right? But now we're back at lows, and trying to rebuild. What are your thoughts? If you look at it in parallel, what do you think is coming next?
Yeah, I'm excited for the next bull run. I think it's going to be bigger than 2017. And to your point, there's going to be more substance this time around, because there's a lot of building that has taken place since the 2017 bull run. And now you have institutions getting involved, a lot of institutions, and a lot of on-ramps also being built across the globe. On my channel, I tried to cover this news. It's generally not the most exciting or sexy news, but it's like, hey, in Africa, or these countries in Africa, here's what's happening. These people are getting access to this exchange and this fiat pairing and this mobile phone access, or whatever it is, in Australia, in Europe, right? And that excites me, because it's like, now more on-ramps, more exposure, more people getting into the new asset class. And I think the institutions are leading the charge this time around versus in 2017. It was a lot of speculators, a lot of people like, hey, my aunt, or not my aunt or uncle, but the reverse. My niece and nephew told me about Bitcoin, and I went and bought right around the Thanksgiving dinner table. So that was very much based on hype. But I think this time around, and every market has hype, you can't escape that. It's going to be more of utility, more of adoption, more of the technologies coming to fruition that were concepts in 2016 and 2017, and a lot of institutions getting in. So I'm very excited. I'm very bullish on the future of the market, and hopefully the Bitcoin halving cycles, because Bitcoin leads the market right now. It is what it is. The next bull cycle is going to be higher prices, and all coins follow.
Yeah. So here, you touched on an important subject, which is adoption in some of these other countries. Let's look at Africa specifically. Then we could even look at what's going on over in India right now, because there's still kind of a ban on crypto over in India. But we look at some of these countries where they've had major issues, corruption issues, economic issues, development issues. And we're talking about corruption from every level, from government all the way up through the United Nations, which is really determining the success outcomes of some of these countries. But now my belief, as I look and what you're saying about Africa, how exciting it is in a country like that, Latin America, Africa, parts of Asia, India, and you see where you're now giving people an opportunity that they've never had before, where they can build their own, they can start taking control of their own financial situation, incrementally build themselves up to actually start participating in the global financial world. Mm-hmm. And it's not unique just to that area, because we have issues in the US as well, where they feel that, and we've all talked about this a lot, but, you have this access to banking in some scenarios isn't as easy as people think it is. And especially when you go to other parts of the world, they don't have the same online access. Even a country, like India, there's a lot of business transaction, But if they have to send a bank wire, they don't do it through their online application. They have to still go into the bank, and there's a lot of obstacles. But man, I think that's so critical. I mean, touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm in the market. I'm excited about the technology. I'm a bit of a futurist. I want to make money. I want to make sure that's clear. But I'm also excited for the technology to help make people's lives better, right? There's a lot of countries around the world, to your point, they don't have the infrastructure, the financial services, and there's a lot of corruption. So this brings a big solution on multiple levels, and that can really help a lot of people move money, save money, take control of their finances, and bring a lot of these countries into the modern day, from a technological standpoint. And when you look at it from a macro level, moving the human race forward, right? Because you're only as strong as the saying goes, as the weakest link in the chain, something along that. I probably butchered that, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Like, we got to bring everybody on board. And I know there's people who look at things from a globalization standpoint, and there's pros and cons, but when you see that there's, for example, living in the United States, we've advanced so much, and there's other countries that have advanced so much, but then you still have these countries, people are suffering, and they don't have access to proper finances and storing wealth and building wealth. And I think that's going to just help move the human race forward, at least from my perspective.
I agree.
Well said on that. And I think you have to bring everybody up. You have to have everybody give them a shot, because I think, like you said, it makes everything better. I wanted to sort of segue here a little bit. I wanted to get into some of these. I'm really been impressed with some of the interviews you've been doing, because you've just really been crushing it. And I want to just share my screen for a second. I want to go and see if there's some takeaways you might have with some of these. Let me see if I can add this here. Boom, there we go. So, you did CZ, right? What was a big takeaway from that particular interview, like that struck you? Like one or two takeaways from that?
Yeah, sure. So CZ, I think a lot of folks wanted to learn about him. So I tried to touch on who he is as a person, his background, and he came from very humble beginnings. I was actually very surprised, kind of like almost third world country type of situation. Some of the things he mentioned about electricity and running water and so forth, to see his story of now where he is, obviously situated very well, the largest crypto exchange in the world, obviously a billionaire now by assets and all that. It's really cool. And what took me back, he's a very humble guy. He didn't have this air about him like, hey, I'm a rich guy, I don't have time for you, or, whatever. He came off very genuine. So I think that really resonated with me. And also that Binance continues to innovate. Like, there's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of things that they are looking at. And I think that's great. I'm a big believer in innovate or die. And they are always staying ahead of the curve. And, some of the things we talked about in that interview was Binance building a mining pool. Well, okay. And then trying to, now some folks may have their perspective saying, hey, some of these things, I don't know about it, like the coin market cap acquisition, to be transparent, right? I personally don't know how I feel about that as well. I still want to let it play out, because there could be some conflict of interest there. But nevertheless, they are innovating, building, and for the most part are doing a lot to push crypto and forward and get adoption and help the community, from what I've seen.
Nice. And then, too, I think we have to touch on this one too. So just going through here a little bit, these are some of the interviews. And again, we'll have the link to Tony's channel. It's down in the description. And we'll probably touch on this Adam Trademan one too, which I love that. But just amazing, some of the projects that you're featuring. This Craig DeWitt one was a really good one too. I thought that was one of those interviews that just ended really quick, and I was like, what? It just felt like it should have gone on for a little bit. But I mean, a lot of stuff was revealed there too. But I think the one that we'd like to know a little more about is Andreas Antonopoulos. So what were some big takeaways from that particular interview?
Yeah, sure. Andreas, a very smart guy, big advocate of Bitcoin. is one of the thought leaders, I believe, in the crypto community. He helps spread the knowledge of Bitcoin and crypto, which generally people get into the market hearing about Bitcoin at this point. However, he is very hardcore with his stance on Bitcoin, where he can, I believe, have blinders to see the other things happening. But I don't hold that against him. I look at what are his pros and his cons, and his pros outweigh his cons at this point, right? Because he does spread a lot of knowledge and helping people understand finances and what the governments are doing and money printing and why Bitcoin was created and blockchain. He does a really, really great job educating folks and understanding that, which I think is one of the ground levels, the foundation of understanding how crypto came about. Now, when you go beyond that, he may say, I don't like XRP or I don't like Ethereum or whatever. And that's where I disagree with him. But I love his passion. And once again, he's a great educator. And I think over time, maybe he may open up his mind around that, the other cryptos and so forth. But I understand, in today's current economic environment, he's a guy who's definitely needed to, hey, wake up, people. Look at what's happening here. This is not a system that's scalable or has lasting potential. You can't keep printing. And he comes from a country that has had issues, Greece, right? Big issues. And we've seen that. And what if that start happening across multiple countries around the world? I mean, what's going to happen? So I think his position, even though his stance is very hardcore, is still valuable, and it's helping people to open their mind and think about crypto and what its potential is and why it's here, what's going on.
Right on. Yeah. And also Craig DeWitt too. So you have like really two people, Adam Trademan and also you had Craig DeWitt, which, one of the cool things, I mean, I got to tell you, my personal interaction with him was I just pinged him DM'd him and said, hey man, this is like early days. I'm trying to set up my PayBurner wallet, and he's like, oh no, here's a code. I'll give you that. We'll fund it for the 20 XRP. So you don't worry about that. It'll be a real easy setup. And I read into like something, and he kind of walked me through it. I'm like, who is this guy? I mean, it's amazing. I'm just some dude who just pinged him, right? And then so I put my music up on X Songs, and he was just really cool. And I'm like, that was another project, kind of like to your point, going back to what you were talking about, Ripple. One of the things that took away from that interview was, look, this is something they go like, when you ask them the question, like, how is this being funded? Who's doing this and why are you doing it? Again, it's trying to get the adoption out there. And as an artist, this is mind blowing to me. As an artist, you sell your stuff. I don't care, CD Baby, whatever you put your music, they take their cut. Or, if you go to SoundCloud, anywhere else, you're giving it away for nothing, but people spend, little guys. I mean, I didn't really I made mine so inexpensive, but I just wanted to see it work. And somebody actually buying my music and watching that XRP hit my wallet was like, holy cow, it's a big deal. I mean, what were some of your other takeaways from that interview with Craig DeWitt?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? With Craig, and we had a lot of back and forth before this interview because there's a lot he has to be careful that he cannot touch on. That was, why, you mentioned he wished it was longer, but unfortunately, it's just Ripple communications team is like, hey, you can't touch on this. You got to be careful. So he's walking that fine line, right? Yeah. So there was a lot more he wished he could have talked about, but unfortunately, due to the legality, NDAs and all that. But he's doing some great stuff. I love the concept of PayBurner and X Songs. And hopefully the folks at Ripple recognize the value. And I'm sure they're paying attention, and he probably couldn't say that, yes, they're going to do this. But I think they may eventually adopt it, right, and push that, because we've seen the Spring Initiative invest in different services, different type of projects that are being built where XRP could be leveraged. And his projects being funded by himself at this point are leveraging XRP. So I certainly think there's a scenario where they can be adopted. And he actually highlighted on Twitter, I believe it was yesterday, that PayBurner is going to be part of PayID or integrated with PayID. And one of the things I asked him was, I know about the micropayments, the streaming of content, music, Scooter Braun. Obviously, he couldn't talk much about that, but depending on how this thing goes, you could see that, right? Selling the music directly, and also the streaming feature they're going to add. I think that could be big.
Well, that PayID changes everything, doesn't it? Because, I think the thing that some people missed out there was the whole agnostic, and Jeff and I talked about this, platform agnostic, currency agnostic. Doesn't care if it's, if it's typical fiat currency or if it's any other brand, and that interoperability is what makes it really sing.
Yeah, I think that's going to be big and just open up more opportunities. Obviously, XRP being the main driver, but to your point with PayID, hey, if you want to pay another currency and Craig says, I want to receive XRP, you have that whole setup. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. What would you say your favorite interview has been to date? If you were to go through all of them, what did you get the most out of personally?
Wow. Now, not to have recency bias, but man, I have to say the interview with Adam yesterday was game-changing. And it's not so much even what was spoken in the interview, but my conversation pre and post. Like, to be fully transparent, I hit him up like, hey, Adam, are you open to being a mentor? Like, I would love to pick your brain from time to time. Like, this guy has a wealth of information. He's the CEO of 3 different businesses. He has a more global view of things versus someone who's just in the United States. He's in Japan and the United States. So he understands the different cultures. So I actually asked him that. I was like, hey, can I keep in touch with you? And I've actually never done that. I never asked CZ for that, or the Winklevoss twins, right? But for him, like, wow, okay, this guy has built things. He's a CEO. He's gone through he's in many different circles. So I would say Adam, honestly, Adam Trademan.
Yeah, I gotta say, it was one of my favorites. Good, Jeff.
I was saying the same thing. It was a really solid interview. I got a lot out of it. I'll tell you, it's interesting. As I was listening to it, and I came to some epiphanies, based on what he was saying. I got a little bit of clarity, understanding, especially the significance of the ILP with the PayID. It really crystallized, nicely. And it is interesting. You see somebody like that. I'm listening to his growth, and he's as a chip maker, and then all of a sudden, his buddy's like, hey, come and join me with this company. What are you going to be doing? Oh, you're going to be doing sales, and it was just like, I'm thinking about, it's amazing, because here people have faith in you to do something that was totally outside his comfort zone. And then he's first quarter, second quarter, net 0 sales. But he was building the pipeline. And the one thing that resonated was that he finally said he discovered his recipe, for success. And that is so significant because, you think about it, a lot of people are afraid to do something different, and they feel that, they have to be perfect at it right away. And here's a guy, everything's on his shoulders. His buddy invites him and said, don't worry, but you're going to be the only sales guy, and our entire company's success, by the way, it's your responsibility, So, and here you are 6 months into it, and you're bringing $0 into the company, and you're like, holy crap, what am I going to do? But discovering the recipe for success, is so key, and so to be able to resonate and take stuff out of it like that, and then, they sell that company, and then he gets invited to another and they sell. And he said they sold that company. What did he say? By the next quarter or the next 6? I mean, it was crazy. The company was around for like a year or something like that. Or he had been in with a company like a year and they sold it. Next one, sold it. Next one. So, I'm like, holy cow. You start seeing that progression. That was impressive, man. That was awesome. What did you think about Alex Mashinsky from Celsius? Because we spent a lot of time with him also when we interviewed him. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, a big fan of Alex, even before the whole crypto. Like, I didn't even know at one point, and I've been in the market since 2016, that he was involved in crypto. I knew of the technologies and things that he founded and the work he did in New York and is currently doing. So he's a very smart guy. I think he's a visionary. And he recognizes now this disruptive technology of blockchain and crypto, and he's all in, and he's certainly aggressive and bullish, and he's trying to push adoption. So I'm a big fan of Alex, and I've had him on my show a couple of times as well. And he's one of those folks I want to keep a close eye on what he's doing, and also keep him coming back on so folks can hear from him. One of the reasons why I do a lot of these interviews is because these people have skin in the game. They're not just some random YouTuber, and I'll throw myself into that bucket of random YouTuber. Why should you listen to me, right? I do my best to try to present the facts and present things logically and reasonably. But at the end of the day, I'm not of that caliber as Alex Mashinsky or Adam Trademan, right? But these guys are building. They're in the forefront of building and pushing the asset class forward. And I think that's why I tried to do those interviews so people can hear from these folks, because their words, what they do, carries a lot more weight than a random YouTuber like myself.
Yeah, and with Alex too, I think it resonated really strongly with Jeff and I. So we did our normal show, and we said, "Hey, Alex, would you like to stick around for the after show?" And of course, the way this is set up, how we sent you a link, and then we realized I actually stopped the recording, and then we had to redo it. And he's like, "Hey, do you mind if I move to another place in my house? And do you mind if I do this?" He goes, "I'm going to do this one standing up." And we're like, "Wait a minute, this guy took almost another 45 minutes." But I have to tell you, it was game changing for Jeff and I. Because one of the things that he talked about was, and this is what really got us motivated, right? Because Jeff and I work on other projects outside of here, and we have some other things we like to do, really kind of like outside of the space. But one of the things he said that really hit us, we got off that interview, and he said, "Look, the winners before this whole thing happened doesn't guarantee that the winners coming out of this." He goes, "Look at this as like a clean slate." Everything, and it was just like everything he was talking about and his background coming up through the communist system, and then having the ability to live and experience other cultures and countries, and then coming here with a bag, basically a bag, not even a suitcase, landing in New York and having some of the biggest exits of New York, VC funded companies. Yeah. And you look at this guy and how humble he was and how amazing he was, and I don't know, Jeff, you want to touch on that, but man, we came out of that interview just like pumped, man. I wanted to just go run 4 miles. It was just insane. What were your thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, man, the same thing, both from what both of you guys are saying, man. And even, I wish I would have asked him at that moment, "Hey, would you consider mentoring us, and being part of this?" Because that was I was humbled by how humble he was, because, and we talk about from his beginnings and what he went through, but this guy's, he said he's always thinking. And it was interesting. We're asking him about stuff, and he said something about, do you, what's your favorite drink or whatever? And he said, I don't, he doesn't drink alcohol at all. He goes, why would his mind's always moving at a million miles a minute. He said, why would I want to slow that down? And just do nothing. And I'm looking at this guy, he's always a step ahead, but he spent 2 hours with us. And we talked a bit about, we're talking about the back ends of the Celsius Pro network, but we got into his beginnings. And then when we did the after show, man, it was phenomenal, and like you, Tony, I agree. One of our motivations for doing these CEO interviews is because they're builders in the space and they've done it, but they've also done other things. Yeah. They've been innovators in their space prior to. It's so significant, it really is. And for us to learn, the one thing, man, that I'm really disappointed within the community, but I look at this community at large, because this is just everywhere in society. People are captured by headlines, they're captured by the sparkly stuff, but they're not captured by the substance. Yeah. So I'm really surprised, and it's disappointing. And, I feel sometimes a little disenfranchised when I look at the community, but, I get beyond it. It doesn't impact me one way or the other, but I look at, certain YouTube channels and they're getting huge amounts of views over garbage, and then I'm like, holy crap, why in the world are you, why tune into this nonsense, and then you spend the time and effort to educate people and bring an amazing CEO on, and it doesn't get the kind of play, and here we're talking about the impact that, two individuals, one, just listening to Adam, your interview from yesterday had an impact on me. Right. And I'm like, holy crap, and then the time we all spent with Alex had impact on us, and this is stuff we could bring to people in this space and say, listen to these people. These guys are going to change your life, because they're builders in this space. We're all passionate about the digital asset, crypto space, the blockchain space. We can't be passengers.
Yeah.
Every one of us here that's passionate about it, we have to start driving, and do something in the space, even if it's small, and that's where these people, and this is our opportunity, it's amazing. But I don't know, man, it's so crazy. And then I'm reading this article yesterday. This 20-year-old kid killed himself because he was option trading on Robinhood and lost, he thought. And now I was reading more into it, and his uncle was thinking that he misread what the option trading report was, but it looked like he had lost $780,000 on an option trade. And I look at how many new people there are in this investing space, whether it's on Robinhood, and it's great. Hey, we're bringing investing, whether it's crypto or stock, to people that haven't had access to it before. Phenomenal. But don't listen to these YouTubers that don't know a damn thing and start option trading and margin trading and whatever trading and the TA, all this technical analysis that, a lot of these people don't know a damn thing about what they're talking about, and it's so slanted. But yet here you have all these amazing interviews of people, CEOs that are building in a space, and you're not going to give them that time of day. It's amazing to me. But that's why I believe, where you're at and where we're at, we keep plugging away, because there's a whole segment of society that want this.
Yeah, Chip and I were actually talking before the recording about this. I think at this point, maybe it's par for the course. I don't know. It's just the immaturity, but the market's going to mature. And I think over time, a lot of those hype cycles, or like you said, clickbaity videos of like, you're going to be a millionaire next month if you whatever, right? I think that's going to go away. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But those are the things, to your point, that are going to, to use the term, wreck a lot of people. Because there's a lot of folks coming in who are new and they mess around with derivatives and all that. They don't know what they're doing. They don't understand investment principles, market cycles. They just think, oh man, I'm going to get rich overnight. And it's like, no, you got to be careful here. You're going to lose your money if you're not careful overnight. So I'm hoping, that yet to your point, like we keep doing what we're doing, and the other YouTubers who stick to facts and logic and like talking about the space, we can help change people's thinking. Like, hey, this is not, you think this is how Warren Buffett looks at things? This is not how he looks at things. The hedge funds out there. So you got to change your mindset, and hopefully people start recognizing that. And, they pay more attention to the substance versus all the hype of you're going to be a millionaire in 6 months, buy this coin. And it's like, come on.
Yeah. Anytime you do any investing, everybody knows, like people have said to me, well, are you discouraged by the price? I'm like, absolutely not. I said, what I would be discouraged by if I saw everything at a standstill, if I didn't see, the ecosystem building out, if I didn't see, the launch of Spring and Forte and that investment, and they're like, well, no, you don't have to use XRP. We just want people to develop, in the gaming community. And then when you start looking at that, would have discouraged me, And I have to say, when Brad Garlinghouse did his all hands on deck video, that one kind of struck me as odd for me, because I looked at like, Brad's always on, and that was like one of those things where he just wasn't, I know a lot of people came away with that thinking, oh, this is great, but I just thought like, it's hard to sit there, we're accustomed to sitting there like, I'm looking at you right now and I'm looking at Jeff, but normally when you do these things, I think people don't realize like, you're sitting there talking to a computer, man. It's like one of the most awkward things, and if you're not accustomed to doing it, it's just weird. You're like, hey, and then this is happening, you're like, I gotta go get something to eat. It's just, you're sitting in your office or wherever, and I think we're, when people look at this, I'm like, look, investing really is a long-term strategy. Yeah, you can, there's a lot of things you can do to make money short-term, but let's not kid ourselves. You said it earlier. We got in this to make money. We got in this to invest, to be able to capitalize. But when I'm on XRP, I'm like, this is a 5-10 year play here. I didn't get into it. I mean, I did listen to a Cartoon Bear, but that was a mistake maybe. But other than that, I think that, I'll blame it on that card. Damn, BG123, what did he know? And I was like, wait a minute, BG, Brad Garling. I was, oh, hang on a second. So when you think about that, I want to segue a little bit here because I want to get into the topic that's Jeff knows that's not a favorite topic of mine, but I want to talk about your thoughts on this digital dollar we keep hearing about. Digital dollar, great for, mass adoption. What are your thoughts about this digital dollar and CBDCs in general?
Yeah, sure. So I believe CBDCs and all these things coming about are because of the disruption Bitcoin caused, right? Bitcoin being the first, even though it's not the most efficient or fastest, it was the original. It has the branding. A lot of people get into market that way, but obviously the market's bigger than Bitcoin. There's XRP, there's a lot of things going on. And I think the central banks and all these folks recognize it. When you have the president of the United States tweeting, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are not real currencies and are used for criminal activity, as though cash is not. You've hit a certain tipping point, I think, right, where it's like, we gotta scramble and get a solution here, or these people are gonna opt out of our fiat currencies. I certainly think that's how the central banks and governments are thinking right now, and they're like, we got to get this going. Now, there's going to be benefits, obviously, because everything's getting digitized now, but I believe, in my personal opinion, that's where this all started. That, whoa, Bitcoin, what's going on here? And then you have JP Morgan, we got to get our JPM coin going, right? All these people are buying these coins. They're not putting their money in traditional assets, and they're getting out of the fiat, and they're using Bitcoin to transact and other cryptocurrencies to transact. So I think there's benefits. I think it's actually going to be great from an interoperability standpoint for cryptocurrencies and other digital assets as everything gets tokenized. So I think we're headed to a full 24/7 market of different digital assets, stocks, commodities, cryptos, whatever it is, digital currencies. And it's actually going to benefit the crypto market. However, we have to see how they actually execute on these CBDCs. Like, are they going to keep printing? Is it going to be, there's going to be accountability with the blockchain, so we know, hey, there's a finite amount. What's going to happen? Or, is it just going to take this, the problems we have right now and just put it in a digital format? So that's to be seen. But I believe they're all scrambling because of the disruption Bitcoin and cryptos are causing.
That's a great, I'm glad you brought that up, because that definitely seems to be what is happening. But we're also seeing we're seeing the plans being laid out also, because they understand that the whole system is broken. And I think Ripple, definitely has a big part in that. People have known from a global perspective, they've been, indoctrinated and controlled by SWIFT. Different parts of the world have different reasons for thinking that. I would say in the Western world, it has more to do with the streamlining of business transaction. In other parts of the world, it has to be with circumventing certain political embargoes and sanctions placed on their countries. So there's different reasons as to why people want to get away from SWIFT. The key purpose and point is they want to get away from it. And a mechanism of getting away from it is through the digitization of their currency, thinking that it's easier to transact because now you can circumvent the normal banking or the banking norm. However, the one thing people are forgetting about is that, like you just mentioned, as you create these walled gardens within your own sovereign digital currency, you still need a mechanism to transact them. And if there becomes a global standard of mechanism of transaction, then your global standard now is the same thing. You're back in the same position. It just might be a little bit more efficient. But at the end of the day, countries are going to do what they're normally used to doing. And this whole circumvention and, it's interesting to look at. But, going back to Chip's, original point, though, what are your thoughts on the U.S. digital dollar? Because we're not really there yet. And there's been the Congress, they tried to push through some ridiculous U.S. digital dollar versus some of the white papers like Giancarlo was talking about, which is a little bit different.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to read right now, because while you do have folks on both sides of the aisles, Republicans and Democrats, on board for crypto, we've seen a lot of congressmen, congresswomen on board. I'm not sure what the holdup is. I don't know if it's some of these folks who are in the certain positions who don't get it, or is it Mnuchin and Trump? It's kind of hard to read. Now, Chris Giancarlo is pushing for it. We've seen they tried to put it, to your point, into the stimulus bills and so forth, but there's still some sort of holdup, which I've been trying to read between the lines or do some research.
Definitely Congress, 100%. It's stuck in Congress. If you think about, when we go back, what was it, like a year ago now, when we all, got together and we put together a video for the Token Taxonomy Act, and we're all fired up about the Token Taxonomy Act. That was a bipartisan bill. You had Darren Soto and Warren Davidson, Democrat, Republican, fighting for this. And like you said, we've had a lot from either aisle. But I know back then, which I'm sure is true now, that more than half of the Congress was still clueless. You have what's her name, Maxine Waters, referring to as Bitcom. We don't want any of that Bitcom over here, and so you don't even know what you're talking about. And how can you? You're in your 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever they are, and plus the other side of it is that they're controlled by the lobbyists, by the banking and the financial institutions, and that's why they're there. That's where they get their money. They know where their paycheck comes from. So they slow it down.
I that's a great point you brought up, because on the system we're in, politics, money rules it, right? Your campaign donations and so forth. And I could see some banks and other folks lobbying against this. So let's see how it goes. It's interesting. I mean, obviously the way they're proposing is that they could speed up stimulus payments, and that could be a faster way to get folks stimulus money, and that's in itself is a whole nother conversation as far as right and wrong. But if you're trying to get funding to Americans, it could be a faster way. And let's see how it goes. I know Chris Giancarlo is really trying to get that going, and they got their white paper going, but maybe next year or maybe this year. Just depends. I think if Mnuchin comes in and pushes for it, and Trump pushes for it as well,
Yeah, I think too that there's a lot of things right now. You got an election year, you got a lot of conflict going on out there. There's a lot of things that are in play that have really sort of I think really distracted people.
Yeah.
I think that deep down inside you do see this willingness to want to do it, but I look at something like a digital dollar, right? Is it really blockchain? If it is blockchain, is it going to be an open? Is it going to be transparent? If it's not, it's like, right now, I mean, I've always made the argument of a digital dollar. It's like, it's digital now. I look at my bank account. If everyone goes to the bank today and pulls out all the money they have, there's not enough fiat currency to cover that. It's all digital. It's all fake anyway. So what benefit really is there to having a digital dollar if it doesn't observe a lot of the policy and rules of what blockchain was created for? So you create something that's like a fake sort of it could help towards that. Yeah, I understand that people would be like, oh, is this like Libra? Is this like Bitcoin? Is this like, well, kind of. But I'm like, okay, so what is it pegged to? The non-ending printing of fiat currency the U.S. has been doing? It's like, what, 25, 26 trillion? Let's go for 30. By the way, we haven't updated the bridges in 40, 50, 60, 70 years. Let's redo all the bridges. And hey, while we're at it, why don't we repave every road? And while we're at it, why don't we fix the airports? It's like, okay, so now let's go ahead and divert that to a digital dollar. This is the weird thing that I don't think it's great for the space. I think it could set it back in a lot of ways, because it's like if people get the idea that these CBDCs, and obviously they're going to be stable coins, right? It's like, yeah, that'd be great to have it. Well, why would it be great? I mean, a stable coin has a purpose. You want to off-road some of your investment money. You want to leave it for a while. You want to buy a dip somewhere, right? You don't want to necessarily put it into fiat or another bank. It's a great place to park it for a temporary sort of a hold. So are people going to trust now these CBDCs that come out? Are they going to be really stable? Are they going to fluctuate? Is it always going to be worth $1 USD? So these are a lot of the questions I have where I don't feel like the principles will be observed, and I find that it's just like it's like an it's a digital dollar. It's almost blockchain, not quite. And Jeff and I have been back and forth where we talk about this a lot, but I'm like, there's a lot of, and then you look at say, well, the former SEC chairman. Well, yeah, when you're on the payroll and you come out and say, let's do this. That pay for play attitude always gets a little bit disturbing for me. It's like, well, that's cool, but why didn't you do this when you were saying that Bitcoin and Ethereum were not securities? Why now? Well, follow the money, people, because there's always a pay to play element. Here's a little something else. Let me send you a little something here, and I'm like, oh, let's write a paper. Let's do this. Let's do that. And that becomes a big emergency. So what stopped at the time? If you're saying that Bitcoin and Ethereum are not securities, what stopped that whole sort of thing from just going down the line? I mean, you had the third biggest market cap. You have other ones that aren't securities. This whole Howey test. I mean, we know it's not a security, but I was like, but you never know. When you see Supreme Court rulings where, what happened this past week, where you can enact, you give a president a lot of power, where you enact an executive order. I've never been a fan of executive orders. I don't think the president should be writing executive orders. Any president, right? Everything should be legislated through Congress. But a president goes and says, "Hey, let's have this," and then it gets upheld in the Supreme Court, and it's not official. It's never been legislated through the House or the Senate. So now, when I see that happening, I start going, whoa. Maybe the SEC does come out and say this is a security, because it doesn't matter if it fits like sound sort of logic and thinking. It just has to say, well, let's see. Yeah, I think it is a security. Well, why? Doesn't matter why. If that can happen, where you can write some executive order, which is silly to begin with, because a new president comes in and then they delete the old executive orders. A new president comes. That's why I'm not a big fan of the executive orders. I think that's too much power as it is, right? So I don't know. I think now more I hear about it, Jeff, and I don't know what your thoughts on this, but I just worry about the fact that, I'm like, of course it's not a security, but then you see weird stuff happening out there, and you're like, well, you never know what they're going to come back with.
If they want to shut it down, with that, but it goes back to an interesting premise, for focused on XRP, to figure this out, or any of them. Look what happened with Kick, their kin token. But they butted heads. They said, we're coming after you, and we're raising money, and we're going to support. What the SEC wants you to do is to participate and work with them through the process. They give you some leeway. If it doesn't meet the Howey test, show us that it does, or it doesn't, whatever, And then if we all figure out that, hey, in fact, because it's an unknown space, that it doesn't, meet the standard, and in fact, it should be a security, what are you going to do about it? Is that necessarily a good thing or a bad thing? And how do you get the investors out of it, as an example? So is that a negative for Ripple? I don't think it's going to impact, I don't know. I mean, it would, because they'd have to figure out how to, buy out all of this money, but they're also holding almost an equal portion in escrow and XRP. That doesn't mean they translate to dollars to give people their money back. It's an interesting dynamic, so to your point, if the SEC from somewhere else, the decision has to come somewhere else, decides they want to shut down a company like that, then they say, well, no, it's a security. And now all of a sudden they have to figure out the financial stake. How does this work? But that directive now is coming from the banks, from these big banks, from the financial institutions that regulate and control SWIFT. If they wanted to play dirty politics, then that could be an interesting fight. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that would be, it'd almost be obvious where it's coming from. And it would be caught up in the court system for who knows how long. It could be a really interesting, drawn out battle. I don't know.
I think something else that's at play too is that this is a new asset class, new technology, doesn't operate the same as stocks, has similar principles for sure. And that's where I think the Cryptocurrency Act of 2020, I don't know if you guys remember that bill, it's trying to update the Howey test in a way, saying, hey, you got to have, this is nuance. You got to have new categories here. And if that goes through, that would be beneficial for Ripple and XRP, of course. I don't see anything happening negative to Ripple or XRP. I think it's so far down the rabbit hole here with banks and American Express, Santander working with the IMF and all these central banks around the globe. I don't think they're going to do it. That's why I don't believe the SEC hasn't done anything. What's taking so long? They could have went after it 2 years ago, right? What's going on? And I think the lack of movement, the lack of action, the lack of even dialogue is a big indication that they're holding on to let maybe the new regulations come in place. that's just my personal opinion. I'm just looking at all the puzzle pieces here. Cryptocurrency Active 2020. We haven't done anything. We haven't said anything. And then you have Giancarlo, even though he's on the payroll to a certain degree, someone of that caliber putting his stance out there is going to have impact and influence, right? The former chairman, this is not some random Joe Schmo. I think it's going to have impact on the folks at SEC. And you have Crypto Mom, who's been trying to put things in place. Safe harbor. The company can, or the asset could be in security at one point, but over time change. It's, being a non-security over time. So I think the moves Ripple have been doing, escrow and distribution and all of that, I don't think, it's just my gut, but I can't say with 100% certainty. But the lack of action, lack of dialogue, and the other moving parts happening, I don't think it's the SEC is gonna come down on XRP.
I agree with you. I don't think so either. Well. Hester Pierce, Crypto Mom. It's like, well, listen, Crypto Mom. Let's get busy. Let's get busy with the crypto part, and let's, I did like her proposal a lot, where she talked about the 3 years to build. You got 3 years, you want to do a token and stuff. I'm like, and then they started talking, well, it might not be 3 years, it might be 2 years. But, to me, that's reasonable, right? These start sounding like reasonable proposals. But I also think the SEC, I think when there's so much at risk and if a misstep could really screw stuff up, I think the waiting is intentional because you want to see what other regulatory bodies are doing. And I also think a lot of it's going to bubble up from the state level, right? So you start seeing states enacting some legislation and then they have something to draw upon versus like, hey, this is going really well. You have a little bit of runway to look at versus like, well, what if we do this, and I don't think it's going to come, it's going to happen. So I sort of in a weird way empathize with the SEC having to come out with these serious decisions that would have, repercussions on the space for a long time. I think that certainly could impact it. But I just like to see something because I think we're waiting on it, right? I think that everything is moving around it and tiptoeing around it. One of the things that Alex Mashinsky said on the interview was like, hey, people are complaining about the SEC. We've been in touch with them the whole way. They have a whole framework, which Jeff alluded to. He says, look, just do the right thing. Follow what they say, be in touch with them, let them know what you're doing. We had no problems at all, launching and dealing with this. So, there's that part of it too. And you don't want to butt heads against them and say, well, screw you, we have this attorney. No, man, don't play like that because
definitely the wrong way to go because you know how that ends.
Badly.
It doesn't end well. Doesn't end well.
Well, we're coming up, guys. We're coming up on time here. I think, Tony, I'd like to give you kind of final word before we get out of here. But I just say, I've really enjoyed the conversation. Could have easily have gone on a lot longer. And I want to just say, before we go, I really appreciate what you do in this space. And Jeff and I always talk about it. But, you're one of the good guys. You're one of the guys that out there that, congratulations on the 40,000 subs. You earned that. And I see 50,000, 60,000 in your future coming up really quick because you're doing the work, man, and you're putting the hard work in, and you said you're just a YouTuber. You're not just a YouTuber. You're a guy that understands it. You're a tech guy, so you bring a unique perspective in how you view things and how you see things. And I want to just say that, man, we always appreciate someone in the space that, we could, look up to and say, look, this is a guy we want to be more like, and it's doing the right thing in the space and building it. And, we surround ourselves with these kind of people, and now we've done some really good things.
Thank you, man. Those are very kind words. I appreciate you guys having me on. I appreciate the work you guys are doing as well. I look at you to similarly like trying to spread substance and facts and knowledge versus overhype. And I really appreciate that. And I've always loved coming on your show and chatting with you guys. I think we think on the same level in understanding the market and the future, and understanding patience is a big part of this, and you got to look at it from a macro level as well, not just my coin and this coin and that coin. So I really appreciate you guys having me on, and it's always a pleasure chatting with you both.
Yeah, it's absolutely outstanding. Before we sign off, though, I just want to reflect back on one thing that we had said. When it comes to building in the space, understanding kind of the direction where things are going in and where people have opportunities. And I think we heard that kind of a common theme. If you go back and rewatch the video that you did with Adam and seeing his progression, go back and rewatch the video you did with Alex Mashinsky, go and watch the ones that we did with Alex Mashinsky, try it, especially for people that are watching, go back and try to get something out of it personally. But there's a common theme, and it's interesting because I've run into a book a couple times, and it's called The Science of Getting Rich. And this book was written in 1910. And there's some things that are paralleled from what he said in that book. And it's on YouTube. So you can go on YouTube and you can watch people narrating the book or orating the book, whatever. And it's in print still. I would recommend that people go and start listening to it. Like I said, in past years, I've run into it. I'm listening to it again. But one of the takeaways and something that he said in the beginning chapters of the book is that it doesn't matter what your surrounding situation is, because everybody has it within themselves to do amazing things. Right. And so, and you have to take that individual opportunity and build something and go and develop something. And he said, you could be working over here one day, and then you are the owner of a company, the next day, and those are the kind of opportunities that exist for us. And one of the parallels that he brought that we can create for this space was that he was talking about the steam engine. He said, you can try to compete with the monopoly that is the steam engine, or you could invest your time and money into the electric train, or whatever, as a comparison, and that's kind of, it was weird, 1910, kind of the direction where things are, but there's a direct comparison. You can try to spend your time against, developing another operating system against a Google or Microsoft or Apple, or you could spend your time in the blockchain space trying to figure out, how you can do something better and different. And the only way you're going to get there and understanding how you're going to get there is by listening to people that have done it, these CEOs in the space and, everything that you brought to the table. So there's just so much there. That's just a message that I wanted to pass along to our viewers, and man, I appreciate everything that you're doing. Always love when you come on the show, and, looking forward to the next time we have this opportunity to sit here on the round table and hash out ideas.
Yeah, always great. And looking forward to our next conversation for sure.
Awesome. So with that, for everybody out there, just remember, go down below in the description. You guys probably know who Tony is, but check out his link in the description below. If you haven't watched him, definitely start watching him, and make sure you sub to his channel. And then also remember, for On the Chain, you can always go to onthechain.io. I know we've been promising a new rollout with the website there. That takes time to do. We're still working on that part of it, but there is another channel where you can get, short form videos, topic driven. Go over, check that out in the description below. You can go see our other YouTube channel. And that's it. Look forward to having you back on. Look forward to seeing all of our subscribers and all the people that participate on the roundtable, and seeing you guys next week. That's
See you
it.
guys. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, guys.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.